We're live. Hello, everyone.
Here we are for another episode of the 6 to 7 Figure Women podcast.
Indeed, we are.
I'm
Now,
really excited for this next sort of series of podcast interviews that we're going to be doing, and really feel like we are providing such a unique space in podcasting, and I'm really excited for what's to come for us.
definitely. And Megan, we're wearing the same color. We've done this before. This was not planned.
We have done it before, and we're across the pond from each other. This is great. So and my
Same
color doesn't
energy.
look like it's the same as you, but it really is. It's like the teal green, and my
Mm,
ears match, and yeah, it's fantastic that we do this. We just want to be each other's color aura, I guess.
yeah, we're feeling it. Same energy, same download.
That's right.
Now,
Well,
today is a special episode. It's just you and me sharing
yes.
our amazing thoughts, let's hope. And we're going to be talking about a subject that we're both obsessed with, which is abundance.
Abundance. And why are you obsessed with that topic?
I'm obsessed with it because since I started taking it really seriously, I have just felt everything in my body, my life change.
Mm.
And scarcity for me was something which was so entrenched and I did not realize it. And once it's kind of like a little door opens and the universe is like, do you want to come inside? And you're like, I don't know, this is a bit out there. And then you just go through the door and you keep taking the next step and the next step. And it's realizing that abundance is available to us. I I always believed it should be, but I had strong beliefs that it wasn't. And so, who knows what the future brings? Who knows what life will throw at us? It definitely throws some spectacular curveballs at times, but like I love the adventure of abundance and I love the opportunity that it gives to see everything from a different perspective. I would say that I'm a coach. I love to reframe, but I'm obsessed with abundance because it's the ultimate reframe always. How about you,
Mm.
Megan?
I like that a lot. Well, one word that you said really made me think of, oh yeah, it's the body. So for me, I experienced when I was in scarcity mode, I experienced a lot of pain in my body, and little things would happen, and I would, throw out my neck for a week,
Mm,
or then cause my shoulder to freeze and all kinds of other issues, or other things would happen and I would have intense hip pain. Um, it's not like I was ignoring the signs of my body, but I kind of was. I wasn't paying attention to them until it was sheer pain. And that was definitely coinciding with scarcity and
yeah.
with, oh my gosh, when is the next client going to come? I felt a lot more scarce when I was a coach than when I took that business offline, so to speak, and then went full time with the dames. So I think that part of the interesting thing was that my scarcity was tied up in, I have to have the income that's coming in from my coaching business. I can't possibly go jump and do what I actually really want to do, which is full time running the dames, because I have to have this 150K from my marketing business still. So I was running it based on that assumption, and that's a scarce assumption. That's a
Yeah.
scarce
There's a lot
mindset.
of, I can feel it, the fear of that. Like it has to be this, when we get really rigid with stuff.
How am I possibly going to be able to? And the truth was, once I followed my heart and my intuition, and I said, okay, I'm going to close my marketing business as of December 31st, 2019, and I'm going to go full time dames. The truth was, as soon as I made that choice, everything shifted for me in the most positive way possible,
Mm,
because I was choosing for the abundant me and choosing for what my heart truly wanted and what my intuition had been telling me for years, which was this is not like the coaching model for you is not the model that you're meant for. You're meant for something different, and you're meant to impact, you know, a larger group of people from a different business model. And I
Yes.
just couldn't trust that for so long because I was clinging on to what I had instead, you know, because I'm like, I already have this much. I'm not going to go for the unknown because, and there were other reasons that I told myself to, but it just wasn't true. And once I made that leap, I made my business generated over 6 figures in less than 6 months. And it had taken me 6 years to get to the $100,000 mark in my marketing business. So it's really fascinating. I'm curious when you can kind of notice that shift that you had. Like, do you remember a time of, here's when I switched from scarcity mindset to abundance mindset, and then what happened? Do you remember?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like it's been like 100 little experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what you just described there for us, Megan, because it's this, oh, a bigger vision comes and you're like, no, I can't do that. That's crazy. That's not realistic. My clients aren't allowed to use the word realistic. It's like a thing. But as soon as you get that vision and you say, no, I can't, no, that's not for me, you can't stay with what you had because it's not a fit for you anymore. And it's like you're evolving into your next level self. And like nothing in your life will accommodate the fact that you're changing into something that's bigger and more abundant. So then it becomes this like, well, I can't go because I can't do that, but I can't stay because this is now untenable. And yeah, I definitely relate to that. I think I've just had phases where I've suddenly just been like, everything about my business is great. I mean, I custom built my business to completely fit me and my lifestyle. And at the time when I started it, I had young children, like a baby.
Yep.
But I also had long-term health condition and sort of severe energy limitations at times. And so I've always built it to be the best fit for that. And so I've had seasons where I've just been like, this is a really wonderful thing to be able to do. Um, but you suddenly realize that something that you've been doing that you love, you're like, oh, I don't love it as much anymore. And so it's that requirement to then be like, well, and I think it's interesting that you brought up the body, Megan, because we can suddenly get these body sensations or like severe anxiety or something, and it's like your body is saying this is not a fit for you anymore, this is not where you want to be. I think
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely had that experience of just like, oh, I've spent several years building something and it felt like such a good idea. When I did my very first podcast, I think I did it for maybe 18 months and did 50 episodes, and I loved that podcast and I branded it around what I was doing at the time. And it just felt like that was the first time I'd done something where it all kind of synced up. And I suddenly was like, oh, I think my brand just changed. Oh no. And so it meant sort of being like, well, and I'm always in denial about these things. So I was like, it's fine. I'll do 2 podcasts. It's a good idea. And then you're just like, you can't be your old self and your new self. You have to go all in. And today's topic is all about kind of becoming your $1 million self, like unleashing your $1 million mindset. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's always forward progress. It's always upward progress. And sometimes we feel really good about what that looks like and what it involves. And sometimes it's kind of like, I just got my brand sorted. Why do I have to do this now? I don't know if you relate to that, Megan.
Completely. And that everything you just said brought up so many thoughts and recollections for me in terms of, I think for our listeners, what's important on this road is you have to be open to the shifts that are going to happen. We are evolving beings, and especially women, it's women and men, but we wanted to talk a little bit about feminine energy. So as women, what we develop on the journey through abundance is trust in our intuition. And it is said, and I don't know if it's true or statistically proven or whatever, that women just have a more clear innate intuition. And who cares? I just say let's embrace it. Whether it's more or not doesn't matter. So as we evolve and as we develop ourselves, and my brand changed, let's see, I want to say I had 6 different business names and focuses in my marketing business from 2009 when I started it until 2019 when I closed it. And each one was just really moving along with me as this evolving being and trusting in my intuition each time. And were there people who 5 years later still remembered me as the mistress of social media, which was my original title and moniker? Yes, there were. But they were so few and far between, because the people who were really following me were keeping up with the changes as I was making them, because they were the ones who are meant to be magnetized to me. Those people, those few people who didn't, they weren't meant to be in my path. And I had to keep trusting. And like you said, there are points along the way where we will have those visions, where we will have those downloads. And for me, that's how it came, was as I got more and more confident in trusting my intuition and in making that time and that space to get quiet and to listen to my inner voice. That is when I had those massive downloads that showed me in image, very clear, this is what the Dames is going to look like exploded in time. And that is what I'm moving toward. And at the time when I was like, oh my gosh, I have to keep going with my marketing business, I wasn't allowing myself to really step into that vision. But that's part of the journey too, is
Yeah.
really being able to build that muscle of trust in ourselves. And, there was all kinds of self-growth work that I had to do to get to that point, and I'm still doing it. But that's part of the journey to abundance, is developing that trust in ourselves and in our knowing, and that deep innate knowing that, yes, we have to be able to trust ourselves and listen to those signs, or look for those signs, or not look for them, just pay attention to them when they're showing up.
Yeah, definitely. Because as well, it's when you get that sort of, and I think this comes with practice. I've definitely found this, but when you first get that like inspiration, you think, oh my gosh, the brand is this, the message is this is what we need to call it. Sometimes you go out and you start telling people and they look at you like, what? It's like, that doesn't land. And so it's almost like the universe, it's like you got to test it, but sometimes people can still say, no, I don't really get that. And it just confirms even more that that's what it is, because you realize actually the audience is evolving, and
Yeah.
these are not the people that it's intended for. So it becomes a really interesting, like when you trust yourself, you can make all kinds of decisions, can't you? And just know this is going to result in the result that I want, the shape that I want things to be.
Absolutely. And I think this brings up another thing for me, which is there's a point in our journeys to 7 figures where we realize that we have been relying almost solely on outside opinions, advice,
Yes.
etc., and we haven't been really considering what we know. And I do believe it's important to have coaches. It's important to have power partners like we do in the Dames that you can mastermind with, because the clarity that you were just speaking of, for most people, happens when you verbalize it to others, and then they ask questions and are able to help you refine things. And that's why, I set up the power partner system the way that I did, because for me, it's more impactful to have those relationships to mastermind with and to have as my thought partners than it is to have them as referral partners, for instance. It's important to have them as referral partners, but it's also, to me, more important to have them as business besties, as I call them, because
Yeah.
it's those relationships that help us. If we're in relationship with the right people, it is like the whole concept of you are the sum of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So I surround myself with others who believe in abundance and who no longer have a scarcity mindset and who've gone through this journey, because we become what we see reflected around us. And that brings up a point that we were going to cover in this podcast, which is sometimes when we look outside of us, there are signs in the economy, in the people that we are around, that almost they don't reflect what we're trying to live.
Mm.
And so we have to be courageous enough to surround ourselves with the people we want to meet, who we want to mirror.
Yeah.
And we want to be like, yeah, it's a big part of what I've realized in the journey through my divorce, which is I was living with people that weren't reflecting the abundance that I wanted to live in.
Mm.
And that was a hard decision to make. And sometimes I think that's something that I would love us to talk about, is that it's not always an easy journey. Like the decision to live abundantly, the decision to live with an abundant mindset means sometimes that we have to let go of things that we have been holding on to
Yeah.
for
Oh,
security, for safety, for whatever. So for me, it was that marketing business. It was my ex-husband. It was some of the things in my lifestyle. It was years ago, 6 years ago, it was drinking for me, drinking alcohol. And all of those things are things that I've left behind in my journey to seven figures. And it's not even just the journey to seven figures. That's just something that a lot of us are wanting, but it's the journey to to living in more of our authentic selves and
yes.
to living more of our abundant selves.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the really big challenges, that when you start to embrace this journey, and, I talked before about the little door, you go through it and suddenly it's like, right, there's another step, there's another step. It starts to change you. And I think the really hard thing can be that some people liked you the way you were when you were small, and they don't like this new, bigger version of you. They don't like this more confident, more fulfilled version of you. And
Mm-hmm,
I find it endlessly fascinating. You can start your business and there's people alongside you and you're all kind of doing the same thing.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes there can be real safety in like a peer group like that. And it can be, a really fun thing. You have lots of people to go for coffee with and do like your initial networking and just really be working out some of these core components of like how your business is going to work.
mm-hmm,
But like some people, they want to stay there forever. And so I've definitely found there's been seasons where I have had to step away from something that I loved, because it was like, this is great, but I am already growing past it. Which, even saying that out loud, it feels terrible, doesn't it? But like, we have to be honest, when you commit to radical self-improvement, radical personal growth, most of the world is not going to be on that journey with you. And one thing me and my husband talk about quite a lot is the fact that like a lot of my like business friends, a lot of my clients, a lot of people that I speak to are not in the same country that I am. They're across the pond, they're across the other side of the world sometimes. Like, it is a unique calling in a sense, and it's not for everyone. And I think that was a real surprise for me, when I realized I'm having such a great time, like in this little, like, let's all be sort of women who pretend to have a business. Isn't it fun? And that was never enough for me. I always wanted more than that. And suddenly you're just like, do I stay like this small size in order to keep the things that I like? And I've found time and time again that actually we are called sometimes to let go of things that we didn't think we would need to let go of. And there are people who don't like the successful version of you. Luckily, there are also, like in my experience, quite a lot of people who love the confident version of you and are just kind of waiting for you with open arms. But I definitely think there's this thing that we have to sort of, we can't always run in a pack. We can't always do what all our friends are doing. We have to run sometimes by ourselves. And I don't know, I'm an Enneagram 4, as if you listen to the show, you'll know, because I think I mention it like every time. But like, that's been something that I've just been like, actually really glad that I'm a 4, because it gives me that ability to just be like, okay, so I'm walking this part of the road by myself. I think I'm okay with that, because it's an awesome path and I'm not willing to miss out on it. But I think that definitely comes at a cost. And I think that will always be attention. And it's all right to have like a season or maybe half an hour where we're like, oh, I think I'll just, stay where everyone else is. But if you're really on this path, if it's really calling to you, I physically think you get to a point where it's not possible. And I think, Megan, what you were saying about the aches and the pains, I strongly believe that kind of chronic illness that's pain based is often that thing of like, your body is screaming to get your attention. Like, this is not enough for you. There is more out there. You need to be ready to come and take it. And I don't want to put a blanket statement. Like, chronic illness is a very complicated thing. I have had chronic illness myself, so I don't want to pretend like what happened to me is universal. But at the same time, for me personally, there were huge elements of like my energy limitations they were emotional, but they were also, this is me living in the wrong shaped life for the person that I truly, truly am. And it's like our authentic self is often there, like banging on the walls, being like, come on, wake up. And, we don't always get that message quickly, do we? It takes
Mm-mm.
time often to really understand what we're hearing and understand like why things in life just, sometimes it feels like the springs are just popping out and it's like, why is this falling apart? And I do think that sometimes there is an explanation that actually this is not for you. This is not the thing that like you are actually being called to. And it takes a lot
Yeah.
of courage to listen to that call.
And it often communicates, in my experience, it communicates in very subtle ways at first. And then like I say, it's kind of like a spiritual feather being tickled on you. And then it becomes a spiritual tap on the shoulder. And then it becomes like trying to shake you. And then it becomes, grander until it's a spiritual 2x4. And then if you're really not listening, it's a freaking freight train that hits you.
Yes.
And I share a lot of these thoughts of mine and these downloads that I have on my Instagram channel, which is my name. And I find that it's fascinating how, man, if I could look back over the times that I've shared things and I see these lessons that appeared for me, and sometimes I'll see them come back around. They've screamed louder, but one of those lessons that has come back around for me this time, and it's been gentler this time, which is, things aren't happening to us, they're happening for us. And I, as a projector in human design, am meant to experience things in my life and then talk about them. And so that is the joy of the season that I'm in now, is that I've had a lot of pain. I've had a lot of experiences that have caused me to feel like, yes, things are happening to me as opposed to for me. And now that I'm on this trajectory of seeing it as, oh, that's why that happened. Sometimes it's 5 years down the line that I'm realizing it, or sometimes I never realize it at all. And I have to trust in that everything is happening for a reason. And I know that triggers a lot of people, but as I really feel like what we're talking about here is the importance of knowing ourselves. And I love what you said about radical self-improvement, which to me, one of the biggest building blocks of that is knowing ourselves. And that means deep study, deep self-study. So as an Enneagram 7, I am able to be very flexible, but I also am avoidant of pain. And that's emotional, physical, spiritual, all of the pain. And so when I'm avoiding pain, I have to say, okay, am I avoiding something here? Is there a lesson in what is happening right now that I'm just not willing to see or hear? Or, is there something that's being communicated to me, so that I have to get quiet and really ask myself those deeper questions? And I think that is our gateway to that information is going to be different. For me, it was really jumping in and getting an understanding Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, Strength Finder, and that sort of opened the door to human design. And, I see that I'm going to go into gene keys next. And there are all these things that I just love going deeper on. But it's these kinds of conversations with you, my power partner and my business bestie, who I love having, because it opens up such a beautiful world. And if I hadn't been courageous enough years ago to realize that, oh, my business colleagues are not just my referral partners. They are so much more than
Mm.
that. And now I'm on this path of, we have our fun friends coming up soon when you also have an event. And
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about these next level ways of power partnering. And it's foreign to a lot of people. Like, oh my gosh, am I really going to share my deepest thoughts and my deepest worries and my fears with my power partners? What does that mean? Will they not refer to me? Will they think that I'm not capable of it? And all of that is so far from the truth. When I'm on the calls with our 7-figure and 7 and 8 and plus figure women in the Danes, they have so much release and relief on those calls because they are hearing their fellow women talk about their struggles, and there is so much healing that happens, and the doors to abundance open more when we're willing to talk about those things that we just are afraid to talk about because we think others are going to consider that we're insufficient. And I've heard from so many of them that are part of other organizations that they don't get to have this vulnerable open space on in a lot of those other organizations. And that's what they love most about the Dames, is the ability to talk about these things that hurt so much in
Yeah.
these upper level, in the upper limiting, as they say in the big leap, that leads to that next level of growth. Like, we hit our ceilings, we hit the upper limits before we experience that, the
Yeah,
squeezing
like
in.
the growing pains, and just it feels like this fog comes down, doesn't it? And like everything
Yeah.
is just falling apart, and you're like, I just don't even know if I can do these things. And it's always, I think when you've been around the cycle several times, you start to realize, oh, okay, yeah, this is what growth is. I'm about to up level. This is actually quite exciting, and it's different, isn't it, to go through it as an experience without like being so in it that you can't even detach from it and see the process that's at work. But it definitely, I think it makes a huge difference when we can, I mean, vulnerability, it creates connection. Often people like us more when they discover the things that we've worked so hard for them not to discover. And I know for me, when I first started my business, the story that I was keenest not to tell was that I crashed out of my corporate career and I had a nervous breakdown. And I was mortified about it. It was in the days before burnout was sort of given the label that it was. So I didn't even really have a word to describe what it was. And I just remember even now, I think I told my coaching group at the time, we did a session about kind of how to be resilient, but also how to accept that stuff just goes really wrong sometimes. And I told them my story, and it was really like, it was a life-changing moment because they all just opened up. And it turned out that pretty much everyone in the room had been through the exact same thing. And it went from being the story that I wanted to hide the most to being the story that I told the most, because actually it is so relatable. And like with these things, awareness creates so much more perspective. And when you can break that spell of secrecy, it gives you that ability to like unlock it for other people. It gives them permission to also show up as their authentic self, their wounded self, their self that feels shame over certain things. But I really do think that we break the power of shame when we are able to just be open about the fact that abundance is great, but like life is not abundant all the time, and the world will throw things at us, and bad things happen, hard things happen. It's not about toxic positivity and just being like, oh, let's pretend like everything's amazing and I'm so glad all these really awful things are happening. Sometimes in business it's like you just get kick after kick after kick, and it can just be like, oh my gosh, I can't take any more kicks. But I think the thing is that we become so resilient, and I don't use that word lightly. As somebody who's been through burnout, I've had that word brandished at me, like, if you were just a bit more resilient, this wouldn't have happened. And I think that was never the right use of that word. But to me, it's about stepping into who we truly are and being ourselves without fear, because then we can stand up and like something may, throw your day out, but like you can walk it off, and you can walk it off in the space of like half an hour sometimes, or even 5 minutes. It's like, okay, I'm doing the breathing and I'm able to move on from this. And I think it's that ability to trust that, like, we are not these fragile beings. We don't need to fear our big emotions. We don't need to fear a lot of what the world is going to throw at us, because actually we are becoming this strong, empowered version of ourselves. You know, how much do we have, like, all of these little narratives, and they're from our child self, they're from like younger versions of us. And so often we do adult situations with a child's logic, and then we wonder why we're so anxious and we can't like face like sending a certain email that on the surface of it is not a threatening thing to have to do. But I think I've found it's almost like you can start to unlock some of these situations through your own healing journey. And
Mhm.
then when something happens, I've had this happen a few times this week actually, you suddenly just, you're like, oh my gosh, I feel this because this thing happened when I was 12. And then you're like, but that doesn't make sense. And your brain is like, oh yeah, I'm going to release that hold. And
Yes.
I don't know if you agree with this, Megan, but I feel like the beauty of the journey is that the more you commit to that, the more you start to see it happen. The more you just become aware of all these other little things that are ready to be released. And that's for me where real growth and real abundance starts to happen, because it's like I can trust that, like, even if I get knocked down for a bit, I'm going to be back up again. And
Mhm.
all of this is helping me to get a greater awareness, a greater sort of authority within my own body. And it's all leading to the purpose that guides me, and that is, you know, the pinnacle of like who I am and why I'm here in the first place.
And that awareness gives us the ability to make different choices
Mm,
because we come around these things again. It's this cyclical journey that happens where we're peeling back more and more layers of the onion and
mm,
we're getting to the core of our own true essence. But there are things that come along the path, like, and I'm just going to go with this from my own intuition. I know that there's a lot of study around shame and worry as being emotions that, in my experience, are scarce emotions.
yes,
And
fear based.
they're also things that show up as signs of up leveling. And they are things that show up when we're feeling that constriction that happens before that next up leveling. And as we go through and as we courageously embrace, you know, people say to me oftentimes, God, this hurts so much. Am I ever going to stop growing and feeling these pains, this constriction? And I'm like, I hope not, in my
Mm,
experience. I hope that I don't stop going through the eyes of needles that are meant to be gateways to my next level, that are
mm,
meant to big time gifts for us when we can see them as such. And when we can change our relationship with those feelings and we can realize that each time they actually get easier because we are more aware of ourselves and we're more aware of those subtle signs that are happening faster, earlier, I should say, not faster, but earlier, we
mm,
can we can truly see that, oh, this is part of the journey. This is part of my journey into my more authentic, abundant self. And
yeah,
there will be a point, I promise you, if you're earlier in these times when you're experiencing the acute pain, or there will be a time when it gets easier or more manageable. If you
yes,
continue on this journey of more self awareness, more self discovery, opening up to being more vulnerable, opening up to sharing more of your journey and yourself, because then it's the law of reciprocity that kicks in. The universe says, oh, she's willing to share her pains and her stories and what has happened to her for the greater good, because others who hear those stories can now say, okay, I'm not alone. I am experiencing these things that she's experiencing. And I wonder what's my next action that I need to take. Is it to call a therapist who has specialty in these things? Is it to find a healer who can help me? Is it to find a coach that is great at asking questions to help me be more self-aware and help me get through this, who's really my Sherpa, as I like to
yeah,
say, journey, because they've been there before and they've made it their business and their life to turn around and put out their hand and say, come with me. I'll help you as you go through these difficult things. Speaking of being flexible, the repair guy just got here, so I'm going to let you take this for a few moments and I'll be back.
Yeah, I'll meet you. Awesome. But yeah, I think this is a really powerful thing to think about in terms of our $1 million mindset. It's not the kind of thing that you just think, okay, let's become a millionaire. That's super easy. Let's do it. It's all part of this amazing journey. And the journey is the thing which is the most powerful so often, because the money shows up as we make the transformation. We love to think that actually it's the money appears, and then we become these different people and we don't struggle with these things anymore. I actually am passionately convinced, from all of the things that I've observed in my life, in the clients that I've worked with, in the businesses that I've seen, so often the money is actually a secondary thing. It's the transformation, it's the journey, it's the realizations that we're starting to make about who we are and why we are in the world. And one of the things that I actually love to help my clients with is connecting to their deeper purpose. And it's absolutely the kind of thing, I think often we can be in jobs, living life, and there's like this like friction of frustration all the time. And it's this feeling of like there is something bigger out there that I'm intended for. And I think it's a really, really powerful thing that, like, you can put the wrong label on that situation and be like, actually, it's not important. I'm just in the wrong job. My family are just very annoying, or whatever it might be. But like, it's about understanding that really we are called to something more. We're called to something bigger. Meg and I'm just talking about how we can have this feeling that there's something more for us in the world. And actually, when we haven't answered that call, we put all of the wrong labels on it. We misunderstand the purpose of that. But I think something that's so powerful in starting to give space, even internally within ourselves, for like, what is this bigger calling? What is this thing that I am put on the planet to do? What is this thing that is calling to me? That, I think I've spoken to a few clients recently actually about like the topic of like jealousy and envy. And when we
Yep.
see something on our newsfeed and it just makes us go, that is not fair. And you're like, oh, that's so great for that person. I hate that person. They are living the life that is meant for me. And, we can go into a whole shame thing about that. And I've been doing a lot of reading recently about the shadow self. I'm becoming obsessed with this as a philosophy, and like, it's such an interesting thing. But ultimately, I think when we get those moments, that is such an amazing insight that we can gain. Like, what is it about that situation that is really, really making me feel angry or like jealous or resentful? And it's that thing, like, if you want that, what is stopping you from going out and starting to make it happen? I think that is always a really, really helpful thing. We shouldn't feel ashamed about that. Maybe we should like be conscious and be kind in the way that we manage that emotion within ourselves. But at the same time, it's like, if that person is doing something that your whole body is now reacting to, that shows that there's resonance there. You want that too. It's all right to want it. What would it look like to start doing life in a way, to start doing business in a way that puts you on that track? Don't settle for less than you actually want. Go for the thing that is really driving you. So I think that's always such a fascinating thing to become aware about. Like, if it's not this, if it's not what's currently in front of you, what is driving you? What is the thing that's calling? Because I find when I speak to women, sometimes they cannot even say it in their head, let alone say it out loud, because there's instant recrimination. Like, you can't have that. That's ridiculous. I can't believe I said that. That sounds ridiculous. But it's like, what is that thing? Like, just starting the process, thinking it, speaking it, planning for it. And I often talk about kind of allowing something to become fully formed. Allow it to be the smallest grain of an idea that we don't need to attach, like, how am I going to do this? What is this going to look like? What if no one wants that? Like, you don't need to go there with all of the details, but it's like, allow it to become fully formed. And it sounds, Megan, from what you were saying at the beginning, that is very much kind of how the Dame's vision was delivered to you, that actually it started off as this thought, and then it becomes an idea, and it all kind of grows from there. And as we start to step into implementation and sort of honoring that call and being like, okay, then let's see what happens. I love what you said about actually at that point, it just, everything started to really pick up momentum because
Yes.
it's already been in momentum. That growth has already been happening, even within your brain and within your body.
And I'm grateful for the fact that I was able to start the Dames while I was focused mostly on my marketing business, because I think it kept me from meddling in it during
Yes.
stages that were critical that I didn't meddle in it. And that's part of the trust and just understanding that the journey is unfolding as it is supposed to. But some of the things you were just talking about make me think about, recognizing triggers outside of ourselves and recognizing things like comparison and jealousy and envy, etc. I remember very early on in my entrepreneurial journey saying to one of my mentors, I really wish that I could be this other person, and naming her.
Mm.
Ironically, we both know this person. It's so weird that this is coming through. So,
You'll have to
and
like DM me who it is because I'm curious now.
mentor said, are you sure that's what you want? Because you would also have to have this and this and this and this that they also have.
Mm,
So be careful of who you're wanting to be, and instead cultivate who you want to be from within you. What
yeah.
version of yourself do you want to become, and what is it that you're wanting to be? And so part of it is like looking at what I would look at in these times when I would have comparison or envy is, okay, what are the beliefs about myself that are telling me that I can't have XYZ? And where is that showing up in my shadow self? Or where is that showing up, if you want to think about it from internal family systems, which is where I tend to go and think of what part of me had an experience when I was a child that caused me to believe that I could only be X.
Yes.
And I can have a relationship and develop a relationship with that part of me that no longer needs to protect me from the fear of being bigger, the fear of XYZ, then I can actually develop new beliefs. And so I look at triggers and things from that standpoint of, oh, what is this here to show me? What is this? What gift does this have for me? And if I can look at that first and say, okay, what am I believing about myself? And then what would I like to believe? And then what would I like to have, or what would I like to go for? And then that helps me inform my actions moving forward, coming from an abundance standpoint as opposed to a limited scarce standpoint of my old beliefs, which our old beliefs are neural pathways designed,
Mm,
burnt into our head, burnt into our mind, that cause us to make choices and cause us to take actions from those old beliefs, as opposed to
mm,
saying, okay, what are the new neural pathways that I need to form in order to be able to live this next version of myself, like a 7-figure business owner, or like, getting a position in the C-suite, or whatever that next big leap is that we're wanting to take, which is different for all of us.
mm,
So I think that that's just one point that I want to make, which is I see 7-figure business owners, the Dame's mission is to take women from the top 15% of business, which is those who are running 6-figure businesses, to the top 2% in women in business, which is the 7-figure mark and beyond. And I see it done, of course, there's a spectrum here, but I see it done, just for simplicity's sake, in a couple of different ways. Without personal growth and with personal growth. And
mm,
those who do it with personal growth, I feel have far more awareness and far more joy in their lives than those who don't. So those who don't make personal growth a non-negotiable in their lives get to these points where things happen in business, and I feel bad for them a lot of times because they're not aware of, well, okay, could that be because you don't trust yourself? Could that be because of this thing happening? Could that be because of this thing? And they're almost blind to any of that. And it's
Yes.
just got to be straight facts. And well, why are we experiencing this loss in our business? Why are we experiencing this turnover in our employees? Why are we experiencing, and it's this continuous blaming outside of themselves for, it's the economy, it's the level of ability of the employees out there in the world today, it's all of these things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there is just so much difference in those who are like, okay, what is it in me that is I'm trying to become aware of through this reflection of my business, and how can I get through this challenge? And it's just such a different journey.
Yeah.
Such a
Yeah, absolutely. And I think having done the seven-figure journey with maximum scarcity in a previous life, it it is hard, and it's hard because we choose it to be hard, and it's become like my absolute kind of North Star to enable that journey to be one of ease and flow and peace and growth. And I passionately believe with everything, it is possible to have all the abundant finances that you want and see a successful, thriving business, but to reject all of the scarcity limitations. Because I absolutely agree with you, Megan. I think there are so many people in the world who are like, small business is hard, people don't want to work for like low pay, there's so many sort of, and it's so like, I feel like my whole body sort of like tenses, because it's like everything's so fixed and so rigid. It's this, it's not that, it's black, it's not white. And I think that like we have this amazing opportunity, we have been given this insight into how to do things differently. I think that people like you and me, we've always known, like our bodies have sort of always had that ache of like, it doesn't need to be like this. And it's a challenge to walk that kind of path. Like the biggest roadblock is always us. The biggest roadblock is always like our fear, our like, we want the abundance, but we still go to scarcity sometimes. But something that I am definitely observing, particularly myself this year, is that like you can get to a point where like in certain things you're just like, this is now a corridor, this scarcity, I've lived in this corridor and I don't want to go back down it. And even if you take one or two steps into it, you can feel that you're getting pulled into it, and you're like, I'm not going to do this, I choose something different. And just that ability to pause ourselves is not like, I don't think the goal should ever be like to never have a bad moment or a bad day or to feel discouraged sometimes. Like this is a constant like battle. If you're in the game, if you're in the arena, if you've got skin in the game, it's just like a constant need to like pick ourselves up and be strong and do the things that sometimes feel incredibly hard. But I think, when you've been doing it for a long time, like I'm coming up for my 10th year, and I know, Megan, you've done longer than that. It's just it does become something that you can see progress and you can feel progress, and you can notice, I am not getting sucked into these like thought patterns that I used to. I am not bothered by that thing that used to really keep me up at night. And I do think that like scarcity is a button that we can choose to switch off. And that might need to be a decision that we keep making every day, sometimes every hour. But the more you do it, the more it becomes possible to choose something better. And I think that's something that I am just so passionate about. And this is why we wanted to talk about abundance today. As we go into the final quarter of the year almost, we need to make sure that actually we're still in the game. We're not writing stuff off. We're not kind of buying into the winter scarcity or, the economy, all that kind of stuff. There's always going to be that kind of dialogue going on. But I think if we can finish strong this year, there is still everything to play for.
Yes. And that brings up one final thought as we close out today, which is sometimes we need to give ourselves rest in order to thrive.
Yes.
And I've seen this on Instagram. Like I love my Instagram because the algorithm is working so beautifully that it just gives me inspirational spiritual thoughts all day long, and it's just fun. I don't have the experience of it being negative and doom scrolling or whatever. That's not my experience. So I love it because it's talking about how they did this experiment with trees. They injected them with this uh, something that basically makes them not experience winter so that they could keep growing. And trees that had previously been alive for hundreds of years died within 1 year because they have the season of rest.
Mm,
And how often are we doing that to ourselves, especially women? How
mm,
often are we doing that to ourselves where we're denying ourselves the seasons of rest and recuperation that are just as important as the seasons of growth? And so if you get really in tune with your body and you get really in tune with your signs, you'll know when it's time to slow down. And as a projector, I am supposed to be completely pausing and not working as much as I do. Projectors are the quintessential people who feel like we should be running like generators, which you are. And we get to burn out because we realize that we're not meant to be in action
mm.
12 hours a day. We're meant
Yeah.
to be in action like 6 or 4. And so me living more of that journey, and tell me about how hard that's been. It has been really tough for me to slow down and say, okay, I need more time to rest. I need more time to recharge. And I need more time to not be in action because there's a diminishing return that happens for me. And that is part of my journey, which is, okay, I got to rest more and I can't be the go, 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 go generator.
Mm.
That's not who I am. And it's been such a liberating and scary as heck journey for me to
Yeah.
down and to give myself that time of rest. And I'm so grateful for it. And in the Dames, I'm sharing more about being a projector, and other projectors who are on this similar journey are sharing with me what's happening for them as they're going through this journey. And I think that is such a beautiful thing. So if there's anything I can say as my closing message, it's make sure that you're part of a community that encourages you to live abundantly, and that encourages you to continue to go for the next version of yourself, and that encourages you to evolve openly. That's
Mm.
one of our values in the Dames, is to evolve openly, because as a leader of this organization and hundreds, soon thousands of women around the globe, I believe that it's my journey to be more authentic and more visual and visible in the good times and the bad. Because if we always see around ourselves is everyone being happy and joyful and always having their ish together,
Yeah.
that's not really true as to what's going on in their worlds.
It's
So I
never
share
true.
having crappy days and when I'm having crappy seasons as much as when I'm having great seasons. And I think that's what's most important. So if you're courageously desiring to be part of a community like that, and you're running a 6 or 7 or 8 figure business, or you're in a director or higher role at a large organization, I would invite you to come check out thedames.co and see if we're the community for you, which, if you've enjoyed this episode, I would guess that you are. And Jessica, would you let everyone know who should be following up with you and where they are in their journey, oftentimes to want to and need to and get so much joy from hiring you as a coach?
Yeah. Well, literally this month, and this came from my husband. It feels like it should have come from me, but he's started asking me, what does abundance look like in this situation? I think like making decisions as an entrepreneur is super hard. And sometimes you're just like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And he's just started saying, what does abundance look like in this situation? And for me, it's just been such a wonderfully clarifying, joyful thing to suddenly, to have that reframe. Like I said at the beginning, coaches love reframes. That's my favorite one. But if you're listening to this and you need that new perspective, like it could be that the things we've talked about today, I strongly suspect it's like there's this wavelength, and when you're on it, you know when you're meeting people and they're on it too. I find this in the dames a lot, actually, when I have connection calls. Sometimes it's like no words are spoken necessarily, but there's just a thing of like, yeah, we get this. This is exactly what it's about. So if you're listening to today's episode and you just feel like your whole body is resonating with what we're talking about, like you want to experience more abundance, but you don't know how. You want to explore what your big thing is in the world. Like maybe you're a consultant or a thought leader, and you're just, there's a bigger space that you're ready to occupy, but it's like everything is always like, oh, in 2 years time, or like next year I'll be able to like ... whatever it might be. If you're ready to actually make that a reality, then there's a decent chance that I'm the coach for you. I coach 6 and 7 figure women consultants and thought leaders, funnily enough. I help them connect to their core purpose. I help them to turn that into a vision for what their business needs to be. And I also help them uncover and unblock all of the mindset stuff that starts to get thrown up and really start to make that a reality. It's not just your business, it is also your whole life. Sometimes it's where you live or what car you drive. Sometimes it's like the trip that you haven't taken. It's all these millions of little things that we deny ourselves all the time because we are not connected with what abundance truly looks like for us and who we are supposed to be. So if that sounds good to you, then do come and find me here on LinkedIn. My website is also jessicafernley.com. I have a wonderful group container called the 7 Figures Club. I would love to welcome you into that if that feels like it would be an aligned thing. So yeah, that's me, and that's where you can find me.
Love it. Well, this has been, I love just when we have these solo episodes of you and I getting to speak about the things that are most up for us, and those things that we've seen as blocks along the way to 7 figures, and really being able to share those awarenesses. So hopefully our listeners are really getting a lot out of this episode and out of this podcast. And we would just ask that you please follow this podcast, and that you also share it with, share it with 5 women that you feel would really resonate with this message today that we shared. We would love that for you to share this podcast episode. And if you haven't yet reviewed our podcast, we'd also love that as well. So please do that.
We're in the business of making more women more wealthy and more fulfilled. If you want to get on board with that, this is the podcast for you.
Yes, yes, yes. Love it. Well, have a beautiful day, everyone. And we look forward to seeing you next month on our next episode.
Thanks for listening.